I, 62, am, am a retired carpenter. For 40 years, I worked with my hands, shaping wood into homes, into furniture, into a life for my family. My wife, Martha, and I built a good life, a simple one, but it was ours. The centerpiece of that life was a small cabin nestled in the woods on a piece of land my father left me. I built every inch of that cabin myself. I felled some of the trees, milled the lumber, and raised the walls. Martha picked the spot for every window, ensuring we'd get the morning sun in the kitchen and the sunset in the living room. It wasn't just a building, it was a testament to our life together. It was where we raised our son, Leo. After Martha passed away 5 years ago, the cabin became my sanctuary. Every scuff on the floor, every worn spot on the kitchen counter, held a memory of her. It was my connection to everything I had ever loved. So when my son, Leo, stood in the middle of his sprawling, minimalist mansion on Christmas Day, surrounded by his wealthy friends and our bewildered family, and made his little speech, the world seemed to tilt on its axis. He raised a glass of champagne, a drink I never cared for, and looked over at me. "I want to make a special toast," he announced, his voice smooth and confident. "To my dad. He's been enjoying his retirement up at the family cabin. I'm so glad I can provide that for him," he smiled, a wide, practiced smile that never quite reached his eyes. Then he looked directly at me and said the words that would change everything. "You like the cabin I let you borrow, Dad." The room was quiet for a moment. His friends chuckled politely, assuming it was a term of endearment, a little family joke. My sister, Sarah, shot me a confused look. My daughter-in-law, Jenna, beamed with pride at her husband's supposed generosity. But I felt the blood drain from my face. Borrow. He used the word borrow. He said it as if he were discussing a lawnmower, not the home I built, not the place where his mother's memory lived and breathed. He said it to make himself look big, and to make me look small. He said it because, on a piece of paper in a county records office, he was technically right. That night, after the guests had left and the fake cheer had evaporated, I found Leo in his study. The room was lined with books he had never read and awards he had paid to receive. He was staring at a stock market ticker on a massive computer screen. He didn't look up when I came in. "Leo, we need to talk," I said, my voice steady despite the tremor in my hands. "What's up, Dad?" he asked, his eyes still glued to the screen. "What you said tonight. About the cabin," I began. He finally swiveled in his expensive leather chair to face me. "What about it? I was just giving you a little credit. People were asking where you were living." "You said I was borrowing it," I said. "You made it sound like a handout." He sighed, a long, exaggerated sound of impatience. "Dad, can you please not be so sensitive? It was a joke. A turf phrase. You know how much I do for you." "That cabin is mine, Leo," I said, my voice low and firm. "We had an agreement. A promise." He stood up and walked over to a polished bar in the corner of the room, pouring himself a drink. "An agreement from 20 years ago? Dad, come on. I was just starting out. You were worried about that frivolous lawsuit from the construction site. It made sense to protect your assets." "It was more than sense," I said, following him. "It was a promise. You swore to your mother and me that you would sign the deed back as soon as the legal threat was over. It was over in 6 months. He took a slow sip of his drink, looking at me over the rim of the glass. "Things changed. My business took off. I started paying the property taxes. I handled the insurance. It just became simpler to leave it in my name. It's an asset on my books now. I gave you the money for those taxes every single year," I reminded him, my voice rising slightly. "I handed you a check every November. You called it my contribution to the family fund, and I appreciated it," he said smoothly. "It helped with the upkeep. But the deed is in my name. The law is the law. Legally, it's my property. I don't see why this is such a big deal. You get to live there, rent-free. Think of it as a perk of being my father." Perk. He called my home a perk. He stood there, in his palace of glass and steel, and called the house I built for his mother a perk. It wasn't just that he had broken his promise. It was that he had erased it. He had rewritten our history into a story where he was the generous benefactor and I was the grateful recipient of his charity. In that moment, looking at the stranger my son had become, I knew this wasn't something I could let go. This wasn't about a joke or a turn of phrase. It was about my life, my wife, my home. And I decided, right then, that I would not let this stand. I would get my home back, one way or another. The days after Christmas were a blur of quiet anger. I drove back to the cabin, the tires crunching on the snow-covered lane. Every tree seemed to stand as a witness to the lie. I walked through the front door, and the warmth of the wood stove greeted me like an old friend. I ran my hand along the mantelpiece I had carved from a single piece of oak. Martha had loved that mantelpiece. She used to say it was the heart of the home. Leo had once suggested we replace it with something more modern, something granite or marble. I had laughed at the time, thinking he was just being a typical city boy with no appreciation for craftsmanship. Now I realized it wasn't a joke. He saw the cabin not as a home, but as a property, an asset to be upgraded and leveraged. My first stop was not a lawyer's office. It was the county records building in the small town nearby. I needed to see the paperwork for myself, to hold the lie in my hands. The clerk was a young woman with a kind smile. She found the deed quickly. There it was in black and white. My signature, clear and strong, transferring the property to Leo for the sum of $1. And right below it his signature. A document born of trust, now a weapon against me. But I didn't stop there. I had a gnawing feeling, a cold knot in my stomach that told me there was more to this than just a broken promise. On a hunch, I asked the clerk if there were any liens or mortgages recorded against the property. "Let me check," she said, her fingers flying across the keyboard. Her smile faded slightly. "Yes, sir. There's a home equity line of credit. It was taken out about 18 months ago." "A loan? Against the cabin?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. "Yes, sir. For a substantial amount," she said, looking at me with a flicker of sympathy. She turned the screen towards me. The number I saw made my knees feel weak. It was a six-figure sum. My son had not just claimed my home as his own. He had used it as collateral. He had mortgaged my past to finance his future. The drive back to the cabin was different. The anger was still there, but now was mixed with a profound sense of betrayal that felt like a physical weight on my chest. He hadn't just kept the cabin. He had put it at risk. If one of his risky ventures went sour, the bank would take it. They would seize the house I built, the land my father gave me, the last tangible piece of my life with Martha. They would sell it to the highest bidder, who would likely tear it down and build some monstrous glass box in its place. I sat at the kitchen table, the same table where Leo had done his homework as a boy, and stared out the window at the snow falling on the pines. I needed to talk to someone who understood the value of a promise. I picked up the phone and called my oldest friend, Frank. He had been the best man at my wedding and the first person I called after Martha passed. He was a retired plumber, a man who, like me, believed that you fixed what was broken and you honored your word. "Frank," I said, my voice cracking slightly. "John? You sound terrible." "What's wrong?" he asked immediately. "You are not going to believe what Leo did," I said, and the whole story came pouring out. The comment at Christmas, the broken promise, and now, the final, unforgivable act. He took out a loan against the cabin? Frank's voice was a low growl of disbelief. "A huge one." "Yes," I said. "He's gambling with it, Frank. He's gambling with Martha's home." There was a long silence on the other end of the line. I could hear him breathing, taking it all in.
"What?"
"He can't do that. It's your cabin. Everyone knows that." "Not on paper it isn't," I said, the words tasting like ash in my mouth. "I signed it over to him. I trusted him. I was trying to protect it, and instead I handed him the keys to destroy it." "That boy," Frank said, his voice full of a sorrow that mirrored my own. "I swear, John, that money has poisoned him. It's rotted him from the inside out. What are you going to do?" "I don't know yet," I admitted. "But he used my home. He used Martha's memory as a bargaining chip. This isn't about the property anymore. This is about respect. It's about honor. You need to be smart about this, John, Frank warned. He's a millionaire. He's got a team of lawyers on retainer. They'll tie you up in court for years. They'll paint you as a bitter old man who's jealous of his son's success. I have something he doesn't have, I said, a flicker of resolve cutting through the despair. I have the truth. And I built that place with my own 2 hands. Every nail, every board. He can't take that away from me. You're right about that, Frank said. But the truth doesn't always win in a courtroom. You need proof. You need something that shows what your agreement really was. His words struck a chord. Proof. Leo thought it was my word against his. My fading memory against his legal deed. But he had forgotten one thing. He had forgotten about his mother. Martha was a planner, a list maker, a record keeper. She documented everything. Our finances, our garden plans, our lives. She kept journals. Dozens of them, filled with her elegant, looping script. They were in a trunk in the attic. I hadn't looked at them since she died. It was too painful. But now I had a reason. Hanging up with Frank, I felt a new sense of purpose. I was no longer just a victim of my son's greed. I was an investigator. I was a man on a mission to reclaim his own story. I climbed the pull-down stairs to the attic, the cold air biting at my skin. The scent of cedar and old paper filled the air. In the corner, under a dusty canvas sheet, was Martha's old steamer trunk. I lifted the heavy lid, and there they were. A neat stack of leather-bound journals, one for every year of our marriage. I carried them downstairs and set them on the kitchen table. My hands trembled as I opened the one from 20 years ago. I didn't know what I was looking for, or if I would find anything at all. I started reading, and with every page, Martha's voice came back to me. She wrote about the weather, about the birds at the feeder, about her worries for Leo, who was struggling to get his first business off the ground. And then I found it, an entry dated the week I signed the papers. She wrote, "John is so worried about this lawsuit. It's a ridiculous claim, but he's afraid they'll go after the cabin. We talked to Leo tonight. He offered to hold the cabin for us, just until this all blows over. He said he would put it in his name to shield it, and then sign it right back as soon as the case is dismissed." He was so earnest, so sincere. My eyes scanned down the page, my heart pounding in my chest. She continued, "Leo swore on his grandfather's Bible that this was just a temporary measure to protect his father's legacy. He said, 'Dad built this house with his hands, and I'll protect it with my life. I trust my son. I know he will do the right thing.'" I closed the journal and bowed my head. The words were a comfort and a curse. Here was the proof of the promise, written in my wife's own hand. But it was also a record of our naivete, of the faith we had placed in a boy who would grow into a man we no longer recognized. This journal entry might not be a legal contract, but it was a moral one. And it was a weapon. I didn't know how I was going to use it yet, but I knew I would. Before I confronted Leo again, I needed to understand the full scope of his deception. He had lied to me, but who else had he lied to? My mind immediately went to his wife, Jenna. She was a good person, I thought. A little enamored with the wealth and the status, maybe, but her heart was in the right place. She had always been kind to me. Did she know the truth? Or had Leo fed her a different story entirely? I decided to call her. I had to be careful, to approach it gently. I couldn't come out swinging, accusing her husband of being a liar and a thief. I had to plant a seed of doubt, to see what would grow. I dialed her number, my stomach in knots.
"John."
"How are you?" she answered, her voice bright and cheerful. "Are you staying warm up there at the cabin?" "I'm doing just fine, Jenna. Thank you for asking," I said. "I was just sitting here, thinking about the cabin lately. So many good memories here." "Oh, it's a wonderful place," she gushed. "We're so lucky Leo has it to share with us all. The kids just love it up there." "He told you he owns it?" I asked, keeping my voice casual. "Well, of course," she said, a hint of confusion in her tone. "He bought it from you years ago, didn't he? To help you out when you were in some kind of financial trouble?" The line went quiet as I absorbed her words. Bought it from me. To help me out. It was worse than I could have ever imagined. He hadn't just broken a promise to me. He had constructed an elaborate lie for his wife, a lie that painted him as a hero, a dutiful son saving his father from ruin. He had stolen my home and then taken credit for his own generosity. He told you he bought it? I repeated, the words feeling foreign in my mouth. Yes, she said, her cheerfulness replaced by a note of defensiveness. He said it was a difficult time for you after one of your projects went under, and he wanted to make sure you'd always have a place to stay. He said you were too proud to accept charity, so he framed it as a sale. It was very generous of him. I felt a cold rage settle over me. Generous. He had twisted the truth into a pretzel, turning my act of trust into a story of his benevolence. He had poisoned my own family against me, making me a character in his self-aggrandizing play. Is that so? I said, my voice flat. Well, that's one way to remember it. What do you mean? She asked, the suspicion now clear in her voice. Is everything all right, John? Everything is fine, Jenna, I lied. Just an old man getting lost in his memories. You have a good day now. I hung up the phone before she could ask any more questions. I sat at my kitchen table, Martha's journal open in front of me, and I stared at the phone. He hadn't just forgotten his promise. He had actively, maliciously, rewritten history. He hadn't just taken my home. He had tried to take my dignity, too. And that was a debt I would make him repay. The fight wasn't just about a cabin anymore. It was about the truth. My truth. The conversation with Jenna lit a fire under me. The lie she had been told was so complete, so insidious, it made me wonder what other fictions Leo had been spinning. I started to think about his business, the one he had used my cabin as collateral for. He was always vague about the details, using a lot of jargon and buzzwords that meant nothing to me. He called it a disruptive tech startup. I called it a gamble. I went to the small-town library and used one of their public computers. I wasn't very good with them, but I knew how to use a search engine. I typed in the name of Leo's company and my son's name. At first, all I found were the glossy articles and interviews he had clearly paid a public relations firm to place. Leo, last name, the visionary who blends innovation with family values, how a carpenter's son built a tech empire. Each one featured a picture of him looking thoughtful and serious, and each one contained a quote about the importance of his humble roots and the lessons his father taught him about hard work. The hypocrisy was so thick, I could barely breathe. I kept digging, going past the first few pages of search results. I found smaller, independent tech blogs and financial news forums. The picture they painted was very different. They used words like high risk, over-leveraged, and burning through cash, one analyst wrote. While the company has a promising concept, its financial fundamentals are shaky. They are heavily reliant on continuous rounds of funding, and any market downturn could be catastrophic. Catastrophic. He was using my home, the only thing of real value I had in the world, to prop up a house of cards. The anger I felt was sharp and clear. This wasn't just disrespect anymore. It was reckless endangerment of our family's legacy. He was gambling with his mother's memory, and the odds were not in his favor. Then I found something that made my blood run cold. It was a local society blog with photos from a recent charity gala that Leo and Jenna had chaired. There was a brief interview with Leo. The reporter asked him about his future plans. "We're looking to expand, of course," Leo said, smiling for the camera. "And on the personal front, we're planning a major renovation of our family's country cabin. It's a wonderful old place, but it needs to be brought into the 21st century. We're going to open up the floor plan, put in a state-of-the-art kitchen, and replace the old, inefficient stone fireplace with a modern entertainment center." The fireplace. The one I built with my own hands, using stones we gathered from the creek bed behind the house. Martha had drawn the design on a napkin one evening. Each stone was chosen and placed with care. It was the heart of the cabin, the place we gathered on cold winter nights. And he was going to tear it out. He was going to erase me, erase us, from the very walls I had built. He wasn't just holding the cabin. He was planning to gut it, to strip it of its soul and turn it into another one of his sterile, lifeless showpieces. That was it. That was the final, absolute, unforgivable straw. My grief and my anger crystallized into a single, hard point of resolve. He would not do this. I would not let him. I went home, picked up the phone, and called him. This time, there would be no gentle probing. There would be no appeals to his better nature, because I now knew he didn't have one. He answered on the third ring, his voice clipped and impatient. "Dad, I'm in the middle of something. Can this wait?" "No, Leo, it cannot," I said, my voice as cold and hard as the winter ground. "We need to talk about the loan you took out on the cabin." There was a pause. "I don't know what you're talking about," he said, but the lie was weak, unconvincing. "Don't you lie to me," I snapped. "I went to the county records office. I know you mortgaged my home to fund your failing business." He sighed, the sound of a man who couldn't be bothered with the petty concerns of others. "Dad, I told you, my finances are not your concern. It's my property. I can leverage it if I need to. It's called smart business." "It is my concern when you're gambling with my home," I shot back. "And now I hear you're planning to tear out the fireplace Martha and I designed together? You want to put a television where our memories are?" "It's called an upgrade, Dad," he said, his voice dripping with condescension. "The place is dated. It's dark. I'm increasing its value. You should be thanking me." "You are destroying its soul," I said, my voice shaking with rage. "That cabin is not about property value. It was never about money, and you know it. We had an agreement, Leo. An agreement your mother wrote about in her journals the very night you made it." He scoffed, a short, ugly sound. "Oh, here we go. Mom's old diaries? What are you going to do, read them to a judge?" "It's not a contract, Dad. It's a fond memory from a woman who's been gone for years. You're being sentimental and irrational."
I'm Busse.
"I have a meeting. We can talk about this later." And then he hung up. I stood in the quiet of my kitchen, the dial tone buzzing in my ear. He had dismissed his mother. He had dismissed her memory, her words, her love. He had dismissed everything that our family was supposed to stand for. The path ahead of me became clear. He was right about one thing. A court battle would be long and ugly, and his high-priced lawyers would likely turn Martha's journals into a joke. I couldn't fight him on his territory. The law, money, business, that was his world. But he had a weakness. A massive, glaring weakness that he polished and preened every single day. His public image. The carefully constructed persona of the brilliant, self-made man who never forgot where he came from. The loving son, the devoted family man, the generous philanthropist. His entire brand was built on a foundation of lies. And I realized, with a chilling certainty, that I was the only one who could knock it all down. I would not sue him. I would not fight him for the deed in a courtroom. I would give him exactly what he wanted, a public stage. But I would be the one writing the script. The idea began to form in my mind, a plan so simple and yet so potent. He wanted to be seen as a great philanthropist? Fine. I would give him the opportunity to be one. I would make him a hero in public, while privately reminding him that he was a fraud. I was going to get my cabin back, not by taking it, but by giving it away. My first step was to find a lawyer. Not one of Leo's slick corporate types, but someone local, someone who understood the value of a person's word. Frank recommended a man named Arthur Henderson. He was a semi-retired property lawyer who worked out of a small office above the town's hardware store. More importantly, he was a veteran. I sat across from Mr. Henderson, a man with a kind face and eyes that had seen a great deal. I laid out the entire story, from the verbal agreement 20 years ago to the devastating comment at Christmas. I told him about the loan, the lie to Jenna, and the plan to tear out the fireplace. I finished by taking Martha's journal out of my briefcase and placing it on his desk. "I want to donate my cabin to a veterans charity," I said, my voice clear and steady. "The problem is, the deed is in my son's name." Mr. Henderson listened patiently, his hands steepled under his chin. He didn't interrupt once. When I was finished, he was silent for a long time. He picked up the journal and read the entry I had marked. He read it twice. Finally, he looked up at me. "That is quite a problem," he said. "Legally, a verbal agreement for real estate is notoriously difficult to enforce due to the statute of frauds. The journal is powerful, compelling character evidence, but a good lawyer would argue it's hearsay. It shows your wife's belief, but it doesn't legally bind your son." "So, I can't win in court?" I asked, my heart sinking. "I didn't say that," he replied. "You have a strong case for what's called a constructive trust. Your son would be considered the trustee, holding the property for your benefit. The fact that you've continued to live there, pay for upkeep, and treat it as your own for 2 decades supports this claim. We could sue him. It would be a long, expensive, and very public fight." "I don't want to sue him," I said firmly. "I don't want a messy public fight. I want him to give the cabin back willingly." Mr. Henderson leaned back in his chair, and a slow smile spread across his face. "Willingly," he repeated. "I see. You don't want to force his hand with a lawsuit. You want him to hand you the pen." "Exactly," I said. "Then we need leverage," Mr. Henderson said, his eyes twinkling. "And you've already identified it. His public image. You mentioned he has cultivated a persona as a philanthropist and a devoted family man. He donates to all the right causes," I said. "He gets his picture in the paper for handing over oversized checks. It's all about his brand. The brand of Leo, the good son." "Perfect," Mr. Henderson said, leaning forward again. "Absolutely perfect. We won't threaten him with a lawsuit. We won't send him angry letters. We will present him with a philanthropic opportunity that is simply too good for a man of his public stature to refuse." The plan we devised was simple, elegant, and ruthless. I had mentioned I wanted to donate the cabin to a veterans charity. Mr. Henderson had a long-standing relationship with a highly respected national organization that provided retreats for wounded veterans and their families. They were always looking for properties, especially ones in quiet, natural settings like my cabin. The first step was to approach the charity. Mr. Henderson made the call. He explained the situation discreetly. He told them that a prominent local businessman, Leo, wished to make a significant in-kind donation in honor of his father, a retired craftsman. The charity was, of course, thrilled. They had a chapter in our state but no retreat center. The cabin would be perfect. The second step was to control the narrative. We worked with the charity's public relations team to draft a press release. It was a masterpiece of corporate praise. It lauded the extraordinary generosity of the Leo last name family and spoke of Leo's deep commitment to honoring his father's legacy of service and community. It announced that the cabin would be renamed the Martha last name Memorial Retreat for Veterans, a touch I insisted on. It was a checkmate move. How could he refuse to honor his own mother? The third and final step was the trap itself. We wouldn't ask him to donate the cabin. We would announce that he had donated it. We would arrange for the head of the charity to present him with a plaque at a public event. We would have the deed transfer documents and the donation agreement ready for his signature. We would present it to him not as a request, but as a foregone conclusion, a wonderful surprise that we were all celebrating. He would be cornered. If he signed, he would lose the cabin and be on the hook for the massive loan he had taken out against it. He would be forced to actually perform the generosity he had only ever pretended to have. But if he refused, if he stood up in front of everyone and said, "No, that's my cabin, I'm not giving it away," he would have to explain why he was denying a home to wounded veterans. He would have to publicly contradict a beloved charity. He would have to reveal himself as a greedy, disrespectful son who tried to steal his own father's home. His carefully crafted image would shatter into a million pieces. I looked at Mr. Henderson, a feeling of grim satisfaction settling over me. "He'll have no choice," I said. "None whatsoever," Mr. Henderson agreed. "He values his reputation far more than he values that cabin. He'll sign. He'll smile for the cameras. And he will hate every second of it. And you, John, will have your justice." The stage had to be perfect. It couldn't be a sterile boardroom or a lawyer's office. It had to be a place where Leo felt comfortable, powerful, and surrounded by people whose opinions he cared about. It had to be his turf. The annual summer barbecue he hosted at his mansion was the ideal venue. It was the social event of the season for his circle. The whole family would be there, along with his business partners, his wealthy neighbors, and all the sycophants who orbited him. It was a temple built to his success, and I was about to desecrate the altar. I spent the weeks leading up to the party in a state of calm resolve. I spoke with Mr. Thompson, the director of the Veterans Charity, a retired Army colonel with a firm handshake and a no-nonsense demeanor. He understood the situation perfectly and was more than willing to play his part. We coordinated every detail. He would arrive midway through the party, along with a photographer. Mr. Henderson would also be there, posing as my financial advisor. The day of the party arrived, bright and sunny. I drove to Leo's house, my old pickup truck looking distinctly out of place among the luxury cars lining the circular driveway. I was wearing a simple collared shirt and clean jeans. I felt like a spy infiltrating enemy territory. Leo greeted me at the door with a hug that was purely for show. "Dad. Glad you could make it," he boomed, for the benefit of those watching. "Everyone, my dad's here." I smiled politely and made my way through the crowd, accepting drinks I didn't want and making small talk with people whose names I would immediately forget. Jenna came over and gave me a genuine hug. "I'm so glad you came, John," she said. "Leo was worried you were still upset with him." "I'm not upset, Jenna," I said truthfully. I wasn't upset anymore. I was past that. I was focused. An hour into the party, I saw Mr. Thompson arrive, looking distinguished in a blazer and tie. The photographer was with him, discreetly setting up his equipment. Mr. Henderson gave me a subtle nod from across the lawn. It was time. I walked over to the sound system Leo had set up and turned down the music. I picked up the microphone he used for his self-congratulatory speeches. The sudden quiet caused a ripple of conversation to die down. All eyes turned to me. Leo, who was holding court by the pool, looked over with an expression of pure annoyance. "Everyone, can I have your attention for just a moment?" I said, my voice steady and clear through the speakers. "I apologize for interrupting, but we have a special guest here today who has a very exciting announcement to make about our family's contribution to the community." I gestured to Mr. Thompson, who stepped forward with a warm smile. Leo's annoyance began to curdle into confusion. He started walking towards me, a questioning look on his face. "Thank you, John," Mr. Thompson began, his voice commanding the attention of the crowd. "My name is Colonel Frank Thompson, and I'm the director of the Wounded Warriors Retreat Project. I'm here today to publicly thank a man whose generosity and commitment to our nation's heroes is truly inspiring. I'm talking, of course, about your host, Leo." A smattering of polite applause broke out. Leo stopped in his tracks, his confusion now mixed with a flicker of pride. He thought this was about a check he had written, another photo opportunity. Jenna beamed, squeezing his arm. Mr. Thompson continued, his voice ringing with sincerity. "Following in his father's lifelong commitment to service and craftsmanship, Leo has graciously agreed to donate the family's beautiful country cabin to our organization. It will be used as a free, year-round retreat for veterans and their families to rest, reconnect, and heal." The applause this time was thunderous. People were cheering. Jenna gasped, her eyes filling with tears of joy. She threw her arms around Leo. "Oh, darling. That's the most wonderful thing you've ever done," she exclaimed. But Leo wasn't smiling. His face had gone a sickly shade of pale. He looked like he had been punched in the stomach. He stared at me, his eyes wide with a mixture of shock and dawning fury. He was trapped. "Well, this is a surprise," Leo managed to say through a smile that looked more like a grimace. He was trying to play it off, to regain control. We were in the early stages of discussion, of course. I didn't realize we were ready to announce. That was the cue. Mr. Henderson stepped forward, holding a handsome leather portfolio. "Not at all, Leo," he said in a pleasant, businesslike tone. "The discussions are complete. We have the paperwork right here for you to sign. The press release is scheduled to go out to all the major news outlets on Monday morning. We just wanted to give you the opportunity to sign it here, surrounded by the family and friends who inspired this wonderful gift." He opened the portfolio on a nearby table, revealing the deed transfer and the donation agreement. He clicked a pen and held it out to Leo. The photographer raised his camera, the flash popping as he took a picture of the dramatic scene. Leo was frozen. He looked from the papers to me, his jaw clenched so tightly I could see the muscles twitching in his cheek. He leaned in close, his voice a venomous whisper that only I could hear. "What did you do? You can't do this." I stood my ground, looking him directly in the eye. In this moment, I am not the old, sentimental father. I am his equal, his adversary. I feel a cold, hard calm settle over me. My voice is quiet, but it carries the weight of 20 years of broken promises. I say, I can, and I have. You're going to sign that paper, son. You're going to smile for that camera. And you're going to give those deserving veterans a home. Or I will take this microphone right now, and I will tell everyone here the truth. I will show them your mother's journal. I will show them the loan documents from the bank. And I will tell them exactly how you tried to steal your father's home and gamble it away. Jenna, standing beside him, had overheard the last part. Her happy expression dissolved into one of utter confusion.
Lao?
What is he talking about? Steal? What loan? Panic flashed in Leo's eyes. He tried to recover, to gaslight me one last time. He's confused, he said, forcing a laugh and patting my arm. Dad, you're not thinking clearly. All this excitement. I didn't even look at him. I looked at Jenna. I looked at Mr. Thompson, who was watching with a stony expression. I looked at my sister, Sarah, whose face was a mask of worry. Then I looked back at my son. I am thinking more clearly than I have in years, I said, my voice rising just enough to be heard by those nearby. The choice is yours, Leo. Are you the man you pretend to be? Or are you the man who would tear down his mother's fireplace for an entertainment center? Sign the papers. It's time to be a hero. Checkmate. He was completely and utterly cornered. The silence stretched on for what felt like an eternity. The smiles on the faces of his friends began to look strained. They could sense the tension, the wrongness of the scene. Leo looked at his wife's face, now filled with dawning horror and suspicion. He looked at the decorated colonel waiting patiently for his signature. He looked at the photographer, poised to capture his triumph or his disgrace. With a shuddering breath that was almost a sob, he snatched the pen from Mr. Henderson's hand. He bent over the table and signed his name on the documents, his signature a furious, illegible scrawl. The photographer's flash went off again, capturing the moment for posterity. Mr. Thompson immediately stepped forward and shook Leo's hand vigorously. "Thank you, son," he said, his voice booming. "Your family and your country are proud of you." The crowd erupted in another round of applause, this one even more enthusiastic than the last. They were celebrating a hero. But I knew the truth. I was looking at a man who had just lost everything that truly mattered, and he had been forced to do it with a smile frozen on his face. The aftermath of the party was as swift and devastating as I had predicted. The moment the last guest was gone, the facade of family harmony shattered. I didn't stay to watch it. I had no desire to witness the explosion I had lit the fuse for. I simply got in my truck and drove home to the cabin, feeling a quiet sense of rightness for the first time in months. The phone calls started the next day. The first was from my sister, Sarah. She was caught somewhere between anger and confusion. "John, what on earth was that yesterday?" she demanded. "Jenna called me this morning, absolutely hysterical. Leo is on a rampage. He's saying you manipulated him, that you backed him into a corner and humiliated him." "Did I?" I asked calmly. "Or did I simply present him with a choice between doing the right thing and showing everyone who he really is?" "He made his choice, Sarah. He said you were getting old and confused," she said, her voice softening slightly. "He claimed you've been imagining things, that you have this conspiracy theory about him trying to steal the cabin." I let out a short, humorless laugh. "Do I sound confused to you, Sarah? I gave him 20 years to keep his promise."
He chose not to.
"He chose to lie, to his wife, to his family, to himself. I gave him one last chance to choose honor. He chose his reputation instead." They aren't the same thing. There was a long pause on her end. He took a loan out against it, didn't he? She finally asked, her voice small. Yes, I said. A very large one. Oh, John, she whispered. I'm so sorry. The next call, a week later, was the one that surprised me. It was Jenna. Her voice was quiet, stripped of its usual bubbly energy. She sounded exhausted. John, it's Jenna, she said. I needed to call you. To apologize. You have nothing to apologize for, Jenna, I told her. Yes, I do, she insisted. I believed him. I believed his story about buying the cabin to help you. I thought he was being so noble. And I let him make you feel small in your own family, her voice broke. He finally showed me everything. After I threatened to leave him, he showed me your wife's journals, the bank statements for the loan. He admitted it all. I'm sorry you had to go through that, I said, and I meant it. She was a casualty in a war she hadn't known was being fought. He's not the man I thought he was, she said, her voice thick with tears. To do that to you, to his own mother's memory, to risk your home for one of his stupid, egotistical projects. I don't know what to do. I'm looking at my husband, and all I see is a stranger. I didn't offer her advice. It wasn't my place. But I knew, in that moment, that Leo's punishment was far greater than just losing the cabin. He was losing his family, the one he had used as a prop for his public image for so long. The foundation of his perfect life was cracking, and it was his own lies that had caused the fissures. The final communication from Leo was not a phone call. He didn't have the courage to speak to me. It was a single, furious text message that buzzed on my phone late one night. It read, "You ruined me. I have to pay off a 6-figure loan on a property I don't even own now. The bank is calling. Jenna is talking to a divorce lawyer. I hope you're happy." I looked at the message for a long time.
I didn't feel happy.
I didn't feel sad. I felt quiet. I typed back a simple, 2-word reply. Then I blocked his number. A few months later, in the heart of autumn, I drove to the cabin. I wasn't sure how it would feel to be there, knowing it was no longer mine. A new sign had been placed at the entrance to the lane. It read, "The Martha Last Name Memorial Retreat. A haven for heroes." The cabin looked the same, but different. There were volunteers from the charity there, raking leaves and painting the trim. They were laughing, working together. The place felt alive in a way it hadn't in years. Mr. Thompson saw my truck and came over to greet me.
John.
Good to see you, he said, shaking my hand warmly. Come, I want you to meet someone. He led me to the porch, where a young man in a wheelchair was sitting, watching his 2 small children chase each other on the lawn. His wife sat beside him, a peaceful smile on her face. "This is Sergeant Miller," Mr. Thompson said. "He and his family are our first official guests." The young man looked up at me, and his eyes were full of a gratitude so profound it almost brought me to my knees. He reached out and shook my hand. His grip was strong. "Thank you for this, sir," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "My kids, they haven't seen me smile like this in years. My wife and we haven't had a moment of peace since I got back. This place, it's a miracle." I looked at his children, their laughter echoing in the crisp autumn air. I looked at his wife, who was watching him with such love. I looked at the home I had built, the home that was now a sanctuary for people who had sacrificed so much. "It was donated by my son, Leo," I said, and the words held no irony, no bitterness. They were just a statement of fact. In the end, he had done one truly good thing in his life, even if he had to be dragged kicking and screaming to do it. As I drove away, I didn't look back. I didn't feel a sense of loss. The cabin was no longer a piece of property to be owned. It had been transformed into an idea, a legacy of healing and peace. It was more Martha's now than it had ever been. I don't know what will become of Leo. I hear whispers through my sister that his business did fail, that he had to sell his big house, that his divorce was messy and expensive. He lost his fortune, his wife, and his reputation. He has nothing left but the brand he tried so hard to build, and now it's just an empty shell. I don't feel anger towards him anymore. I don't feel much of anything. My life is quiet now. I have my memories. I have my dignity. And I have the knowledge that the home I built with love will now be filled with it for years to come. My son learned a valuable lesson about the difference between value and worth. He had the deed, but I had the legacy. And in the end, that was the only thing that mattered. He finally learned what it feels like to have something precious taken away from him, not by force, but by the quiet, inevitable weight of the truth.